get started with the panel. The panel will be for about an hour. The first half an hour will be really introductions from my wonderful panelists. And then it'll be a little bit about their takeaways from today because today has been a powerful day of talks. So I'd like to hear from them what they got out of the talks. And then we'll go into audience questions. So if you could please, write down your questions and ask us your questions. So let me introduce my panel. Jay Lacroix, who is right there, he'll be joining me. He's the founder of Linux TV. And then Jeremiah Cyrus is going to join me. Jeremiah, are you here? Please join us. Jeremiah, come on down. And then Lisa Marie Nemfi is right here. Lisa and I go way back. We've worked together for a long time. And then Ariel Fox is also here. Ariel, are you here in the room? Yay! That's it, and then myself. So what we'll do is we'll go through introductions, we'll go through some takeaways, and then we'll go into audience questions. Thank you. Okay. So just to quickly introduce ourselves on the panel, I'm Nithya Ruff. I've been your MC all day long, but just a little bit more about me. I head the open source office at Amazon, and I also work very closely with the Linux Foundation board. I sit on the board. I have two lovely daughters and live in Raleigh, North Carolina now. And this is a topic that's very near and dear to my heart. I grew up, as a woman of color, and that shapes my experiences. And I definitely want to make sure that doors are open for others to join us in tech and in open source. So with that, Jay, could you introduce yourself, please?
Actually is on.
Are all the mics on?
Check 1, 2. Okay, that's better.
Yes, thank you.
All right, cool. Technical difficulties kind of just are all around my life dealing with technology all the time, but I love it. So my name is Jay Lacroix. I'm the founder and owner of Learn Linux TV. It's an education company that focuses on Linux, probably the most famous for the YouTube channel of the same name. But I also do courses and I write books as well. Mastering Ubuntu Server, the 4th edition, just came out not that long ago. So I have been a Linux fanatic for over 20 years, and I cannot believe I'm in front of all of you today. It's just been an amazing journey. And one thing I'll say is that while I was along that journey, people have told me you will never amount to anything in IT. You will never make it. But who's sitting right here in front of you right now? And you know what? Thank you. We're all passionate, and I'm just loving the energy from everybody, and I'm just so excited to be here. Thank you.
Hi. I don't think this is working. Yeah, I don't think this is how the mic is working. We might need your help. Thank you. Hi, I'm Lisa. Lisa Marie Namfi, technically, but I go by Lisa, and I'm with Cockroach Labs. I'm the head of developer relations for CockroachDB is the database, but my community role is I run a really large user group in San Francisco Bay Area. Right now it's called Cloud Native Containers. It started as the first ever OpenStack user group, and then we got into Docker, then Mesosphere, then Kubernetes, and now we just love telling end user stories. So if you're in the San Francisco Bay Area and you want to speak at a meetup, come hit me up. But I've been an open source advocate for so many years. I'm now also a CNCF ambassador, just because I just think open source is, as everyone has been talking about today, an incredible way to build community, build opportunity, meet people, get advocates, and we can talk more about that. But I'm so pleased to be on stage with Nithya. Once again, somebody mentioned something about sponsors earlier, and the value of that and go get one. And I just thought, well, Nithya has been my sponsor for so long. And I looked around the room and I thought, Nithya's probably been the sponsor for about half the room for so many years. So really grateful to you for asking me to be here. A little bit tired because I just spent 6 nights in Detroit at KubeCon, but I'll try to keep it together because this is important and I'm glad to be here.
Hi everyone. Gosh, it's been a while since I've been on a stage that's this big with this amount of like my voice that I can hear back to me. I'm Errol Fox. My pronouns are they, them. I work for an organization. We've just changed our name, formerly called Simply Secure, now called Superbloom. I actually started my open source career in an organization which might be familiar called Ushahidi. Ushahidi are a Kenyan open source humanitarian organization that created a crowdsourcing tool for the Kenyan elections back in 2007, 2008. So I work a lot on human rights tools, and at Superbloom, sorry, I'm still gonna mix up the name because we only just changed it last week. We work on a lot of human rights and privacy and security related tools, and I'm a designer. So I am really stoked to have heard from numerous other designers and other people that are not designers talking about design. It's super cool. From a community perspective, I've helped to wrangle the open source design.net community for about 4 or 5 years. And that's a great community of designers of all different kinds and all different levels of experience doing design in open source. And also the Sustain Design and UX podcast, so where we do lots of interviews with designers about open source, and we also have a working group. That's me.
Hey, oh, okay, it's working. Hey everyone, I'm Jemiah Sayas. I'm the head of developer experience at New Relic, where I focus on leading our developer relations org, all of our technical content outside of the docs. So things like our open source sites, developer sites, technical blogs, pretty much any property that deals with technical content for the company. And also developing most of our open source demo applications, our large scale demo platform for the organization, and managing our presence at events like this. So that's me at work. I'm from Miami originally, and I also am a founding member of a 501c3 nonprofit there that focuses on dealing with homelessness and disaster within unrepresented communities. We've been working in that space for about 7 or 8 years, helping somewhere around 300,000 people so far. And now we're looking at creating solutions that would allow us to develop scalable models to deal with some of the same problems, as well as trying to figure out how do we use technology as a way to combat homelessness or issues that the working poor deal with. And so that's just me.
Wow. Such an amazing panel of people. So what I'm going to ask each of you to spend a few minutes to talk about is what were the top 3 or 4 takeaways today from listening to all these amazing talks? And, you know, what do you want to kind of elaborate on or build on from these talks? So starting with you.
So I think that something that everyone has in common is that there's something that they're passionate about. There's something that they want to do. Maybe it's a hobby, maybe it's work, and obviously we're here because open source is awesome, because that's what it is. But what I don't understand is why it's the situation where if you want to do something, that's not good enough. If you want to do something, you want to join a company, you want to get into a project and contribute to it, that doing it can, just getting out the door and doing it can be the hardest thing to do because there's people that are telling you that you can't. And that is not what we're trying to hear. And after a while, that can really bring you down. And how many people could have also been up here with us that would have been up here with us, but are now doing a job that they didn't want to do, that they're not passionate about because someone told them that they couldn't, and they were believed. And I think that's a big problem, a really big problem. But everyone that was here talking has persevered through that, and they've told stories about their experiences their challenges, their desires, and their goals, and what they want to achieve. And they did it. And that's amazing, and I really appreciate that, because I think everyone up here is setting an example for anyone out there that was ever told that they couldn't. And you know what? They're doing it.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, one of the impactful things I already mentioned from Jerome's talk, so many of those slides were impactful. The bias written into software, don't get me started on that one. We gave a talk at KubeCon about that. But the 1 in 12 underrepresented minorities having a sponsor as opposed to 1 in 5 males, and the impact of not having a sponsor, that was huge. But also, Peter's talk, all the talks had something impactful. I could go on forever, but I'll just pick one. So Peter's talk about hiring, for those of you that were here, and the slide he had, I think it was a quote from someone from HP or research that they did, who said that women will want to check every single box or they won't apply for a job, whereas, as we know what the flip side of that is, men will apply for a job they don't feel overqualified for. Women won't apply for a job because we'll feel underqualified. So it's exactly the opposite mentality for so many people. And I've really had to think very carefully about how we write our job recs and how much stuff we put in, because the old tendency used to be, well, let's just ask for a ton of stuff because no one's going to have everything. But that was weeding out a lot of women, and especially younger, or not even age-wise, but not as experienced, newer to the industry. And if you think about what ends up happening, the flip side of that is when a woman does get into the role, or an underrepresented minority, the amount of stuff that we take on because we feel like there's absolutely no room for failure. So Guy and I were just talking about this, last night. You pile it all on, and it can be frustrating for your colleagues. So it's like, oh, you took on too much. Why do you take so much on? Because you need to focus and be like really good and ensure success. It's not that we don't have a choice. We feel like we have to. So we don't say no. All the projects get dumped, and we feel like we have to, and that we have to knock them all out of the park, or we're not going to be successful. And it's exactly the opposite. You have to laser focus. You have to learn how to say no. You have to be able to have boundaries, and then you will truly be successful. And you have I think Patty Azzarello calls them ruthless priorities. The glass ball that you don't want to drop, and let the other ones drop. It's really, really hard for us, but you have to be able to do that. And that was one of the things I got out of Peter's talk. I don't know if Peter's still here, but thank you, Peter.
3 things. One of the most enjoyable things to see today was, I remember Nakima's talk in 2019, and I really enjoyed it then, and I enjoyed your sequel, obviously. It was great. I love when the stage is shared between people that we have weird ways of attributing merit in the community. Some people might agree, some people might disagree, but the way that we acknowledge the value of people and the things that they do in open source is often really skewed, whether it's what they do, i.e. code is often more wanted than other things in the open source space, or whether it's the length of service that they've been here. And I think that the more that we share the space with different kinds of people doing different kinds of things in open source for different lengths of time, different experiences, this is what is going to help our community become more inclusive overall. It's just going to become the thing that we do. It's going to become normal, ordinary, that we include all these different kinds of ways of doing things in open source. So I love hearing personal experiences of how people engage with the topic of open source and tech. I think we need more of that. I love hearing about human rights, and human rights from an organizational perspective that didn't sound, how do I want to put this? Performative.
Yeah.
So coming from like a tiny nonprofit that does like a load of stuff with some of the trickiest tools around surveillance and anti-surveillance and kind of circumvention of internet censorship and things like that, it's really great to hear a big organization like Cisco really put their all behind topics around human rights. And again, would love to see more happening there. And as an organization that's hiring recently, I've learned today and been reminded of several things that I want to take back to our hiring process. So those are my 3 things.
So I'm gonna front load my answer to help myself out, so I don't forget what my three things were. They deal with biases, the hiring process, and there was one that speaks about sponsorship. So those are going to be my three, and they all really hit like really close to home for me. So starting off in biases, I think that it was really cool to hear someone speak about how important it is for us to start addressing some of those biases that we have individually that start to show up in the technology that we create. And that's really how they get there, right? Because it's us that's writing the code. And so if we can start dealing with those issues internally, it's going to lead to less of that being a problem, but also then starting to building testing systems and making sure that we're programming our like models the right way, or really testing them thoroughly to make sure that we're starting to address them and try to figure out solutions there. I think it's really important for us to start making these efforts, is because we've heard of some of the instances where, oh, the hand dryer doesn't recognize brown skin, and things like that start to show up. But it gets a lot more dangerous where when it's not the hand dryer that's not recognizing brown skin. And so for me, in 2016, I had almost a SWAT team show up at my job, whereas I really thought I was going to jail, and I had no idea what was going on. It was basically a machine model, or like an AI system flagged me for doing bank fraud at a bank that I'd never been into. It's just like my image from Facebook photos. And that was just because the system didn't recognize brown skin or brown faces well. And so it did a very improper match. And the way that that kind of really impacted my life at that state of like me fearing that I'm going to lose my job, fearing that I'm going to jail and being put inside of this, SUV with my driver's license being the size of like a standard size sheet of paper. It was just like, wow, this is really crazy. So from personal experience, the bias one was like, we need to make as many improvements as we can there, because it really impacts you at a human level if we allow those things to continue to happen. And I didn't go to jail eventually, just some really awkward conversations with the cops that I'd never want to have again. The second one is hiring practices. And as I'm in a space to where I am responsible for hiring and crafting job descriptions and putting together interview plans and schedules, and also being responsible for the humans that are on my team and assisting them in navigating their career and advancing their career paths, it was some very valuable talking points in there that I know I need to take back. And it made me think of one of my experiences to where I had a take home, and it's like, I don't want to do this, right? But I want the job, but I do not want to do this. And I came into tech from a design side. I used to be a designer that taught myself how to code, and ended up being a front-end developer to start like my tech career. And then design, you do not want to design for free. That's like one of the things of like, I'm not doing that. Like we'll talk about rates, but so it started to make me think of like how it's acceptable to say in the interview, I want you to build me this thing, or I want you to write, this blog post for me, and that's okay. But if I was a designer, I'd be like, I'm not doing that. So it really made me think of like some of the practices that we put into place. It makes me question, why does the tech interview feel like you're running a marathon, at 6 hours when you're in a room with multiple people, and how do we make that process better? Why should I feel flustered and exhausted at the end of an interview cycle? Or if I don't make it to lunch, then I know I probably didn't get the job. It's all these things that it really made me consider. And so I thought that was a very valuable talk. And then my third one, front loading. Okay, so I always speak about like the importance of mentorship. And I thought for many years, I wanted a mentor. I had no idea how to find one. It's just something that I always hoped someone would see me teaching myself how to code, staying up late at night and sacrificing my weekends and saying, you're passionate about this. Let me take you under my wing and help you. And it never fully happened that way, but I did get to speak with a few people in the course of like the later stages of my career, speaking about mentorship and how important it is. But I spoke with a hiring manager at Ultimate Software, and had a really deep conversation of like, how do you go from mentorship to sponsorship? And so seeing the slide where I never really spoke to anyone else about sponsorship, I think it is important for us to understand what that really means, right? Whereas mentorship is, I'm gonna help guide you, or I'll give you some advice. Whereas when you get to the level of sponsoring someone, it's when they're not in the room, right? Like you are gonna stand up for that person and say, I know John can do that job, or I know she can do that job and we should give that to her. Rather than us pulling someone else in from outside, we should look internally, and I'm gonna recommend that person. That is true sponsorship. I'm gonna put my name out there with you, and we're gonna make sure that you get this level of advancement. And I think that that's incredibly important. And I hope that people, even now at this part of my career, sponsoring me when I'm not in the room, and I look forward to doing that for my employees and my friends as well, of like, I know this individual, I know they're capable of doing the work, and so this is who we should be speaking to. So those were like my 3 takeaways.
Powerful, powerful points.
Yeah, can someone live tweet that? Sponsor people who are not in the room. Can I say one more thing?
Yes.
Because I'm also having memory issues, obviously, because I didn't even realize we were supposed to say 3. So I want to add one because Fatika's talk was amazing. And one of the points where she said if you're going to make, this was talking about, coding and open source projects and contributing. And if you're going to make it for someone, you have to make it with someone. So if you want to make sure you're including everybody in your technology, you have to make sure you're including everybody in the process. And I believe there was an analogy of like, don't just scratch your own itch, scratch somebody else's. It wasn't her analogy, it was a quote. It's kind of weird. I feel weird even saying it. But I think it goes beyond that, and she took it beyond that. It's basically, you can't know what you don't know. So of course you're going to make software that you love, and you're going to open source it out. That's the ethos of our industry, right? I love that. Everybody I went to high school with wrote something they needed and then thought their friends might need it too. But they're not going to be able to write something that somebody else needs unless somebody else tells them that. And they're not probably going to ask unless they are told to ask. So these things have to be incredibly deliberate, and I love that part of her presentation. We have to get deliberate about this. And inclusion doesn't just mean someone who's technical to write that code, because if you still need the information, even if you write the code, right? But you need to collaborate. So I love that. And then something for the audience, the talk that wasn't given today, Lisa Schistler-Smith, she was going to talk about old and overlooked ageism in tech. I was really wanting to hear this talk, and I think we're going to open up the end for more comments. And if anybody has thoughts, this is why I'm giving you a heads up, so you can think about it a little bit. I would love to hear people's thoughts and insights about that, because I think that's something that, it's a presentation I haven't seen delivered hardly ever. It's a talk we have all the time in the elevator between some of us, but we just don't have that openly in a forum like this. So if anyone has expertise in this area and thoughts, cue it up. We'll pass around the mic.
I would say +1 to that. I mean, this industry is so young, and it tends to favor the young, and but yet we have incredibly experienced and seasoned people that need to be in this industry to add their dimension, add their superpowers to the conversation. Some of the takeaways for me, to Jeremiah's point, I think there's a saying that people are more mentored than sponsored, especially women. Speaking from a woman's perspective, everybody thinks that they can give us advice, but nobody really opens the door for us. And so you do need a sponsor, someone, like you said, in promotion conversations or in assignment conversations or in recommending for a raise or taking up a job. You need someone who will say, I know this person, and I'm going to vouch for this person and stand behind them. A couple of other thoughts that I liked. I liked what Nikema said about unwritten rules. We invite people to come into tech, but we don't tell them how it works. We don't tell them the game or the rules or, how promotions happen or how, performance management happens. And so you end up, feeling blind and not knowing how to optimize your career or how to get to the next step or how to network or communicate or be strategic. You're told all these things. Be more strategic, network more. But you say, how? Tell me how and where, and how to do it. So I thought that was really, really wonderful. And the last thing I will say is, over the years, we've kind of talked about diversity, then we've talked about inclusion. I love the talk about equity, what it means, and what belonging means. The definition of belonging is really towards the person themselves, right? The person saying, yes, I do feel heard, I do feel like I'm here and I fit in. It's not about an action to bring them in. It's them saying, yes, your action was successful and I do feel included. So that was fantastic.
Can I mention something about that topic as well? Because
Yes.
Ruby's talk, that hit home. I don't know if Ruby's still here also, but that was beautiful. And she used one of those famous quotes about diversity as being
Yes.
invited to the dance and
Yes.
inclusions being asked to dance or whatever, invited to the party, asked to dance. And then the analogy of the E being the on-ramp to the door, somebody building an on-ramp to the door. I really think you need to take that so much further. Like you have to really think about what that means, because it means sponsorship so much earlier in the process. Like maybe this was a school dance that they were talking about. Well, who's in this school in the first place? Who got included to be in this school? How, if you don't have an adequate representation, that's not by accident, right? These things are not by accident. And then you have to be deliberate about correcting those non-accidents over the years. So that involves scholarships and sponsorships. And maybe you're bringing people that live in different neighborhoods. So how do they get there? What, the commute that we hear about that's 2 hours long for some people and 5 minutes long for others. So are you sponsoring Uber rides to the bus station or Uber rides all the way to the school? I mean, all of the miles and the steps that you have to take to make sure that we correct these gaps that are all over the place. And look, one of my favorite organizations, a charity that one of the communities I work with sponsors a lot, and our company now does too, is called The Last Mile. And they go in and train incarcerated citizens and make sure that when they get out of jail or prison, they can immediately go into the workforce in tech jobs. So they're teaching, it's like a coding school for incarcerated individuals. Well, if you think about who's being incarcerated in this country, this is closing a much needed gap to get a much underrepresented minority back into the workforce. But if you don't do these things this deliberately, they don't happen. So I liked that point too from Ruby's talk.
Yep. So we'll open it up to the audience for questions. If you have a question, do we have an extra mic for them? I can give up
I
my
think we're
mic.
using all the mics.
Yeah. We can have someone, Jay, hi, would you mind taking the mic? If you have a question, if you could put your hand up, and then Guy will help you with the mic.
Hello. Well, that's me. This is something I encountered when I entered tech because I came in non-traditionally. I was actually unemployed when I discovered a free code boot camp that could teach me how to program. And when I started doing the classes, I was working part-time, minimum wage job, and that's all I had ever known. Then I got hired, and I realized I was supposed to know a bunch of things that I didn't know. I didn't understand what I was supposed to do with retirement. They kept saying 401k. I'm like, I don't know what that means. Should I ask them? Is it bad that I don't know? I would like to know like some of the ideas you have around that intro period when people get brought into a team and they're kind of expected to have all this knowledge about savings and life insurance and all that stuff, but they may not know, but how to kind of engage them in a way that doesn't shame them for not being aware of these things.
I'll just say something quick and then hand it off to you all. I would say if companies can do a baseline assessment, when someone comes on board and ask them the questions, do you need additional information on this? Do you know what this means? Or, you will be asked to go sign up for all these things. And what is your knowledge level? So if they can kind of gauge where you're coming from and where you are, and then match the onboarding program to some of the gaps that you may have, because all of us have gaps. It's just in different areas, and then tailor the onboarding program to what you need. That would be, I think, fantastic. I know at our company we have an onboarding program where a manager can assign a buddy, assign a mentor, and tailor the types of training programs that they have to take for the next 3 months. It's a 3-month program. The buddy system especially, I found, works tremendously. Just having, so I've been in the workforce for 30 some years, but this company was brand new to me, and having a buddy who knew how to navigate the company was huge.
Yeah, I would say, just hop in a little bit. I agree. Having an onboarding buddy absolutely helps. If it's not a process that your company has, then speaking with your manager about it, about possibly connecting you with someone that can serve, you know, as someone that you maybe meet with weekly for your first few weeks, just so you can ask those questions. Also, I think by putting together a custom onboarding plan with, you know, welcome to the company, Slack channels that you may want to join, calling out key people within the organization that you may want to meet in your first 30, 60, 90 days. And some of the things you may want to ask them is what I would normally do when I'm onboarding a new person, as well as recommending set trainings. I think that's on the management side of like doing your best work to make sure that the person you're bringing on is successfully onboarded and has the right connections, at least the ones that you can think of, you know, as a recommendation. And you're never really going to hit that 100% mark of supporting every single one of their needs, because on an individual basis, things will change, but also being open to the conversation of making sure that your new person feels comfortable with speaking to you and letting you know kind of like what's needed. And then you, as the IC or a new person that's joined the company, you have to be willing to advocate for yourself and speak up as far as like, hey, I need these things in order for me to be successful, or I have these questions. So never really feel that you can't just kind of like advocate and speak up for yourself. It's one thing that all underrepresented groups have to do better. And I learned that, you know, along this journey. I think another thing that's been incredibly helpful for me is ERGs, right? So when I first joined New Relic in particular, and a few other companies, ERG is an employee resource group. And it gives you a space that, for me, it gave me a space that felt a bit safer because it was people that were easier for me to relate to. And so whereas I may not be comfortable going into my team's channel, it's like, hey, I have no idea how to do this thing. I could go in the ERG channel and say, I have no idea how to do this thing. You know, can someone help? And then people will reach out. And so those are some of the resources I think that are just incredibly helpful in successfully onboarding a new person to the company. But even going past onboarding, you know, making sure that all over the long term that you feel that you have like the right connections and support you need to do your best work. Because as you take on new roles or teams change or you get promoted, the dynamic of the work that you're doing is always going to be shifting. Like nothing that we do in tech is static. And so making sure that we always have those resources are important.
Sorry, do you want? Okay. In tech and open source, we often like put a lot of emphasis on like confidence and yeah, I got this, and not so much on curiosity and openness of asking questions. And I think that that needs to be much more embraced as something that we like, openness in all stuff, right? Not openness in just our code or the other things that we open up, but openness in like ourselves and how we welcome people into our space. Because work is scary. Work, there's always things that are new terms. I worked on a project about magic wormholes recently. I didn't know what a magic wormhole was. What? Yeah, right. If you want to know, I can. If you don't know, I can try and tell you later on. But they're cool. But there's always stuff that we're all learning, and I do think the buddy system is great. We use it a lot in Superbloom. And we don't necessarily limit people to just one buddy. And within our management system as well, we've got like people managers that are looking after people's progress, but we're welcomed and encouraged to talk to anybody on a peer level, to share with anybody that we feel more or less or equally comfortable with. I have a peer buddy that has helped me work through a company statement that we've had for a little while, which is that we're a women-led organization at Superbloom. And as somebody that regularly gets perceived to be a woman, but I am not a woman, I was concerned that having this as our company statement would make people think default that I'm a woman when I'm not. So I had a buddy advocate for me with this, and she was actually the one that approached me and said, do you feel comfortable about this? And I was like, no, actually, I really appreciate you asking. So having that kind of empathy and understanding to endorse that buddy system is really good, encourage that amongst staff. And I guess the other thing that Superbloom does, and Ushahidi did as well, I don't know if they still do it, but we actually curate and build our company policies openly and together in our meetings. So if we are thinking about our holiday policy, how we want to work together. All of our different official policies go through all members of staff. We're quite small, so we're able to do this well. But it does mean that we get to put our 2 cents into every policy that we agree to, and that they're never, always 100% set in stone. They can be amended if something changes in the world, because a lot changes in the world, and we should be able to be flexible for that as organizations.
And one thing I'll add, just that I haven't heard said yet that I think is super important, when you're looking at the job that you're considering, ask about that. Like, choose a company that does this really well. Because if the company's gonna invest in your onboarding and help you be successful, that's probably a really good place that you wanna work. So as you're interviewing, interview them about how they onboard and what processes are in place. One of the reasons I chose Cockroach Labs is because they have a very famous, very open, transparent, open sourced even interviewing process and onboarding process. It's called Molting, Month of Learning Things, because we lean into all cockroach analogies. But the molting it's a month where you're not expected to just dive into your work and do all the things. They actually give you a month to learn things. And so that's gonna include all the things, your financial stuff, your healthcare stuff. I mean, that's even more confusing than the financial stuff, right? Oh my gosh. So all of that stuff. But the last thing I'll say is with the financial thing, I mean, I know it's daunting and scary. You just gotta drive right through that fear and ask those questions, because one of the reasons we don't have a seat at the table is because we're too scared to ask. We're too scared to walk through that door and go in that room, and it has caught us out historically through so many things. So I know it's scary, I know it's daunting, I don't know anything about finances or healthcare, but those are like the most important things. Those are the seats at the table that you need. So bust through that fear, get mentors outside the company, however you have to solve that, but please solve that. Everybody do yourself a favor and solve that one.
So in regards to being onboarded and trying to understand, health insurance and all these other things that you may or may not be excited about, one word that I really dislike is assumption. I feel like that's at the root of so many things that are really, really bad. And I've unfortunately had a lot of turnaround, going through work with companies just, being sold or closing down. So I know what it's like to be the new person, and it is so awkward. And then to be the new person and you don't really understand what they're telling you about, benefits and things like that. That's really hard, especially if you're in a group onboarding and you have to be like not understanding things in front of other people, and you may or may not be okay with that vulnerability. That puts you in a position where, you're starting a company and you are super anxious, and that is not a good way to get things started. Later on in my career, I worked at a company, and their onboarding process, part of that was, these are the key people that work here that we recommend that you know. And they didn't stop there though. They didn't just give you the names and just call it good like a lot of other companies did. They then said, what I want you to do is put time on each of these people's calendar. And at first I thought that was interesting. I thought, am I gonna be annoying these people? Are they gonna be like, oh God, another meeting? No, it was expected by everybody. If you didn't put time on their calendar, something was up, because it was part of the culture to do this. So every time a new person joined, they were told, go ahead and put time in their calendar. And not one person complained. Not one person appeared put off by this. And is it possible somebody might have been inconvenienced? Maybe, but I don't think so. Either they're really good actors, or I felt like they really were interested in knowing more about me. And part of that, each one of them asked, are you good? Do you have what you need? And it was so amazing to me to be asked those things. And it kind of helps with being new, because that is one of the hardest things when you're new to a job. You know nobody. You just gave up your previous job. Maybe you wanted an advancement. The previous job wasn't paying you enough. So now you're over here and you're getting paid. Good, great. But you got to love the company too. And I feel like some employers just don't do a good job of putting them in, themselves in your shoes. And I think that should be a focus.
Can I add one thing?
Yes.
I'm going to plug a repository because we're at an open source conference. My boss, my ED, made a project one time called Adulting. So if you go on GitHub and look up, maybe I think it's called Adulting, I'll find it. But it's like a repository for all the stuff that you're supposed to know as an adult, and you can openly contribute to that. So I think she'd probably be a bit embarrassed if I was plugging it. But it's a great source of information about all these different things, and it's probably something that we should be maintaining a bit more openly.
That's a really good site to know. I think there's another speaker question there. Yeah, please, go ahead.
Thank you. So I want to loop back to the idea of being the voice in the room and lifting people up. So that happens. Someone is lifted up, there's a vacancy. Someone else is lifted up, they fill it. There's a vacancy. Someone else is lifted up, they fill it. There's a vacancy. At some point in time, the entry level, there's a vacancy, and that's really where I'm kind of getting at with my question. Tech skews young. We've talked about that, and of course we all know that. And here I am, 50 years old, and even I've tried to hide that on all of my intakes. If you take a look and say, well, he graduated college in 1994, let's go back 4 years. He entered in 1990, 18 years. He was born in 1972. Oh my God, he's old. I recently ran into a situation. I've been unemployed for 5 months, and I'm not quite at that point of desperation yet. Okay, I am, but I'm masking it. But I reached out to a recruiter and kind of hid all of that. The recruiter wanted to talk to me. And then as I started putting details in, the recruiter said, oh, you know what, for your experience and everything, this job only pays X $1,000. There might be something that's a little more challenging for you. Why don't you let me go back and talk to my other people, and we'll see if we can get, and I've never heard from him since. I've reached out to other recruiters in that company on LinkedIn. I've responded to him on LinkedIn. So, we need the ugly elephant in the room that unfortunately wasn't addressed today is ageism in tech. How do those folks who are coming in, maybe Act 2, Act 3, the bonus act, how do we get those voices in the room who will speak for us when we're going for that entry-level position? Like, yeah, okay, so he's not going to be making what he did at his previous job, but he wants to get in here.
Great question. How do you not make assumptions about the person that they're too experienced or too seasoned for this role, and open the door for them to enter this role? That's a great question. I don't know if any of you have got anything to add, to speak to that.
Yeah, I would say I think of ageism often. I mean, I'm aging, right? And so we're in this career where being cutting edge is normally viewed as being young, fresh out of college. Like, that's how you know what's trending or what's coming. And I don't necessarily agree. I don't have an answer for it, right? I think that we're going to have to start dealing with that as one of the main biases that we'll start to experience as we all age in tech or with tech. But in listening to your question, I think that there's a few things that we also just have to stop in general. And a part of it is the idea of you're not going to make as much as in the last role. It doesn't matter. Like, the role that I'm applying for, or the job that I'm looking for now, shouldn't depend on what I made at my previous job. If I made the decision to apply for it, then I understand that that comes with a pay increase or a pay decrease. So it's an understanding that the individual is aware of this and it's a decision that they made. Another thing is that we have to be more focused on just the merit of the work, regardless of how old or young you are, your background, your color, your like any of that stuff. Can you do the work? Like technically, can you do it? Are you a good enough designer to do the design work? Are you, you know, whatever it is that you're doing, if you can do the work, then that's the only thing that really should matter. And I think until we can get to that point, we're always going to experience some of these issues. And so that's what we, you know, should be working towards, hopefully.
So first of all, when you have somebody who wants to work for you and you turn them away for a really dumb reason, I mean, that's just the most horrible thing ever. But I've seen and experienced stages, I mean, I haven't experienced it, but I have witnessed it, being in management, which I later worked into within my career. I remember there was an opening in a entry-level help desk department in which I worked. And they wanted me to, you know, find someone in the company that I think would be a good fit. And the person that I wanted was a 50-year-old black man. That's who I wanted in that seat. He was the best person for the job, there's no question about it. He was always so nice and caring to the people on the phone, and I felt like we need that. And he really does a great job. And what was so horrible about this was when I told him that I wanted him in that position, he looked at me like I'm playing this cruel joke on him, like I'm gonna lead him up to work in this role and then just leave him high and dry. I mean, he looked at me like, and he literally said, "Why do you want me?" He had this look on his face, like, "Why did you want me?" And I literally said, "Because you're the best person for the job." And he himself was made not to believe it. And I think that's about being the change that you want to see. But the problem is when you're the one going for the job, you can't be the change that you want to see. Because you're trying to get the job, and it's the people on the inside that need to make the change, but you're not even, you can't even get to the inside yet. So I feel like if more people will stand up and just choose the right person for the job and leave their stereotypes at the door, things will be a lot better. But if you're the job applicant, I feel like it's not your job to solve this because it's the leaders that need to solve this. Hopefully you get that job, you become a leader, and you can be the person in making the change that you want to see. But at the same time, that's a really horrible predicament to be in. And working in management, I even remember another person I wanted to hire was an older woman, and she was very passionate about technology. She just wanted her foot in the door. She went through the AWS certifications, and she was really trying. And then my boss was like, "She's older, she's a woman," and that really offended me. And he literally told me that he's going to hold me accountable if this doesn't work out. It was one of the most horrible things that I had to work with. Thankfully, that company doesn't exist anymore. However, the thing is, when I hired her in, the highlight of that for me was promoting her into system administrator, which is the job that she wanted all along. And that was one of the highlights of my career.
Awesome. Any other questions? I saw a few more hands go up.
Yeah.
Yes, please. Oh, right here?
sorry.
Okay, sorry.
Hi.
We'll
this-
come to you.
This also relates to ageism. I kind of tick the box for probably most of the diversity categories. And I've been a developer for a very long time. Ageism is something that I've never so far experienced, which I'm happy to say, but I have experienced in my last position not getting a certain job for being a woman. And I got the other job, which once I got inside of the company, it was apparent that I wasn't part of the boys club. But my question actually to you is, because of my age and because I associate with a lot of people who are seniors, in their everyday life, these days, everything is surrounded by technology. And going to the grocery store, going to the gas station, using a credit card, going online and paying for something. And I find that a lot of applications are not geared towards seniors. And there are seniors who will refuse to take part in technology because it's not easy. And even as a developer, I find some applications that as a layperson, I use them as a layperson, and it's like, wow, what happened? I mean, even banking online or paying a bill, where an application looks like one thing for 10, 15 years, and then all of a sudden, with no notice, with no, they use icons. And if you're not familiar with the new icons, then it's like, wow. For the longest time when they changed one application for me, I wasn't as familiar with the log off icon. I had seen it, but it just wasn't one of those things where, it had been used in anything I've done for a while. And it took me a long time to figure out how to log off of my application. And I thought, wow, I mean, this is for young people. This is for someone 30 and under who is used to going on these applications and seeing nothing but icons with no, when you click on the icon, there's usually a pop-up, a little ghost, a balloon that will say what it is. And in applications I've used, I've done that. So my question to you after this long presentation is, how in your programming or development or technical life are you considering, or have you worked towards improving some of the technology that you're involved in to support people that are seniors?
That's just an incredible question. When we talk about accessibility, we talk about people with disability or people from different languages or different, other dimensions. We often, I don't see actively people talking about how do we make it accessible and easy to use for seniors. I think that's a completely neglected area, at least in all of the areas that I have seen. And yet the senior market is such a huge, huge market. And we have to make it easy for seniors to use tech. Otherwise, I think it excludes them from opportunity, frankly, and are subject to a lot of fraud because they don't understand how some things work. And if a phishing email comes or a text comes, they don't know how to tackle it. I think senior education and accessibility for seniors is a huge, huge gap that I see. So thank you for bringing it up. Do you all see that gap as well? Yes.
I mean, they're not going to be able to learn those.
Yeah.
I should say, add to the list of people that you're going to sponsor some seniors, because they're not going to be able to learn all of the technology. There is some technology that is being deliberately written to help, but just let's face it, they're not going to be able to. So make sure you're spending the time and you're sponsoring not just the people in your own family, but volunteer places and, sponsor somebody that you can.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think it goes back to some of the talks. I think Vithika and someone else, apologies, I've forgotten name, but it's design with or co-design processes. This is why design is such an important aspect. Design doesn't just mean the colors of buttons and the icons, it means the meaning of those to different kinds of people at different points in time. And the reason that we have an iterative design process, or we should invest in an iterative design process, is because things change over time. The meanings of words, the use of emojis, all this kind of new stuff that's changing a lot, it needs to consistently be invested in as like a effort to design with for those products and explicitly design with.
I'm sorry, we only have time for one more question, which is right here. But we can talk at the reception. Okay.
Okay. Yep. Hi, I'm Brianna Jackson. So I work at Cisco. I work with diversity data, and on the there's a new team called the fairness team. So I wanted to ask about if there was any examples that y'all have of using data with helping with the decision making in your work that touches on the DEIB space. Yeah, I just wanted to learn a little bit more. I feel like a lot of people talk about the data needs, and and some of the data does exist, but then they forget about looking back at the data when something does change to see if it reaches the main intent that was originally started.
That's funny. I just gave another talk last week on that topic. It was called Data-Driven DE&I. And obviously the E is, like, as Nithya said in the beginning, the thing that I always just try to lean in on because it's so important, and it's probably, people still say D&I, and you have to say the E, that's the accountability. That is what is gonna close the wage gap. That's gonna keep people, accountable, honestly. And data is a great way to show the gap. So one of the data points that I was talking about last week, we just did a Kubernetes report. One of the communities I work with is called the Data on Kubernetes community. And one of the cool things, I'll talk about this a little tomorrow during Community Leadership Summit, but if you're organizing a community, some of the cool things you can do is like commission these reports and get data. You should always be looking at the data and figuring out what you want to measure and what's important. And then how are you going to use that data to show to whoever whatever you need to prove. So one of the data points that came out of the Kubernetes report was about, really it showed the skills gap. It showed, security was the #1 issue, but talent and hiring talent was the #2 issue. So by the way, if there's anyone here in the Kubernetes ecosystem looking for a job, 60% of the enterprises says they're hiring in the next 3 to 6 months, even though we're in like a recession, not recession, hiring freeze. So people are hiring for these skills. How do we make sure, though, that we're getting, skills gaps filled? And this is something, if you think about like how generational wealth has really held a lot of our communities back in this country in terms of wealth and who has it and who passed it down. You have that same thing in education. You absolutely have that same thing in enterprise software. So if you think about the early adopters to a project like Kubernetes, those corporations are way ahead of, just like early adopters of any technology, right? And they're profitable now in numbers that this report showed. So one of the things we encouraged is if you happen to work at one of those corporations, you've got to lend your privilege, you've got to lend your, your access, bring in folks to help close some of these gaps, but you have to be deliberate about it. And if you're in a corporation that has DE&I metrics that hopefully go all the way to the top, like the board, you can take that kind of data and say, okay, here's an issue. Everybody's hiring for this. We need to hire for this, but here's who we need to hire. And we're going to look in different places that we didn't look before. And so that's one example of data, looking at those reports that look at trends in communities, but not thought leader trends that come from enterprises that were interviewed.
I might ask a clarifying question about your question, which is, are you looking also for like examples of when data has been used to affect a tool or a product? Right, cool, okay. No worries, because I don't know a lot about CHAOSS, but also when I think about data and open source, I think of the CHAOSS project, which is always worth a look at. But in the design process, what we do with data is contextualize it. So data is great if we get data on open source usage of a tool and products. That's how we use that in combination with a number of other kind of design-related contextual tools and research to make sure that that data is not just numbers on, not just numbers that we talk about on a slide, that it becomes real changed things with functions or whatever needs to be changed within a tool or a process or a community or whatever needs changing, and that we can measure that throughout the progress through like a rigorous user testing process and those kinds of things. So that's kind of the process. But one thing that I'd love to mention is that there's a tool called Clear Insights, which is a privacy and security, respecting data, open source data tool, which is well worth a look at.
So with that, we'd like to conclude the panel, and I want to thank all of my panelists. This was an incredible discussion, an insightful discussion, and you all asked some great questions. I wish we could take a lot more questions. The reception at 5:15, slightly behind, is, I believe, downstairs, and it's sponsored. It's right. Oh, okay. Fantastic.
But wait, Todd, don't you want to do the thing before everybody leaves?
Oh, yes, yes. And a big thank you to Intel for sponsoring the reception. I also want to thank Guy Martin for taking the mic around for everybody, and our fantastic AV team that helped us throughout the day. Thank you very much. And back to you, Todd.
Thank you, Nithya, for hosting the entire day. Yeah, but he's going to do the thing.
Perfect. Thank you. All right, to everyone that participated, thank you all. Thank you, thank you. I remember I warned you that I would thank you many, many times before you left, and I'm only on thank you number 5, so we've got about 10 more to go. I can squeeze 10 more in the next 5 minutes. I do want to remind you of the Community Leadership Summit taking place tomorrow. How many are coming back tomorrow, or Tuesday or Wednesday? Ooh, that's what we like to see. Look at all those hands. Thank you all very much. So CLS, that's the acronym for Community Leadership Summit. A very important event. I think it's about 10 years old. It was started by John O'Bacon. John couldn't be here with us this year, but Guy Martin has taken over, and he's actually going to run things tomorrow. So that starts tomorrow morning. Check-in, our check-in registration desk starts at 9, opens at 9, and the event itself, live programming for CLS, will start at 10 a.m. So I encourage, it's a free event, won't cost you a thing. If you have not registered for that, and maybe you're learning about it right now for the first time, you can, I don't even know, we might have actually exceeded our cap on that, but if you really want to go and you're not able to register, find us, okay? We will make sure that you can go to that event. We will bump the cap up for you. Just let us know, okay? But for those of you that are already registered, thank you very much, and we will see you tomorrow. We've also got 4 extended workshops. Kent C. Dodds just came in. He's standing at the back of the room. He's actually delivering one of them tomorrow. Jay LaCroix is right here. I know you're delivering one. He was on our panel today. And then Errol, you're delivering another one tomorrow, right? Tomorrow as well. A design workshop tomorrow as well with Django, a partner. Oh, hello. Hey, how are you? Very nice to see you. And then we've got one more. Jason Van Gumster is going to deliver Blender. For those of you, it's a 3D rendering, 3D animation software. Very, very popular. And he's going to give away a few books tomorrow as well. So that's the workshops. But do come back. And then Tuesday, Wednesday are traditional conference days. Let's give away a MacBook Pro. I know that's what you're waiting on. Nithya, I'm going to ask you to do me a favor. I'm going to put you on spot. And I'm going to ask you to... hold on. Do you mind holding that?
Not at all. Just put my hand on a name, something like that.
Yeah. Choose a number between 1 and 278.
Oh, gosh.
People that are actually here today.
Okay.
That actually checked in. So we're just under 300 for this event, which is great.
I'll go with 41.
41. Amr Hadi. Wow.
Ooh.
Wow. We weren't joking when we said we were going to.
Wow. Congratulations. Yeah.
Yep. That's fantastic. Last year, the gentleman that we gave it to, I think he was in disbelief. He literally didn't think it was real. He's like, you're handing this to me. Yeah, we really are. So congratulations on that. But with that, any last words, Nithya?
No, it's been an incredible afternoon. I really thank you for spending your Sunday with us. It's not easy to leave your family and friends and come spend the time with us, but the talks was so insightful. Thank you to all of the speakers. You all did incredible, insightful talks today, and it was such a pleasure to moderate the panel and answer some of your questions. I hope it was useful for all of you. Thank you.
Yeah, we'll see you outside. Perfect.